Hello, everyone. We're just letting everyone else enter today's session, and I'm just slowly, you're going to hear a quick echo, hopefully not, updating the link for the Consultation website. So should you wish to watch the Consultation website, this session on the website as well, and after the session too. One more moment or so before I start making introductions. So, good evening, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well and had a good start to the new year. Thank you ever so much for joining our consultation session about our proposals for 60 to 74 Sewardstone Road in Chingford. My name is Rajman Dare from Huddle Communications. I'm responsible for managing the consultation. Some of you will heard about this consultation from a leaflet that was sent back before Christmas, a letter that was sent earlier this month, or from word of mouth or posts from Councillor Goldie and the Love Chingford Group, or some notices sent from DARDA, the Residents Association as well. And we delivered 1,500 leaflets and letters closest to the site. If you do know of someone who is interested in the proposals, we're more than happy to kind of meet them in person or send them copies as well, whether that be outside or a place that's convenient for them. I should let you know that this session is being recorded and is being streamed to the Consultation website. It will be available on the website as well, and the same goes with the slides, and we're happy to email or post them to you. At the end of the session, I will send across the copy of the survey, and that should also pop up at the end of today's session. We're going to go on till 8:30, so we'll try and be quick in regards to the presentation itself. In terms of the format, we'll be starting off with a presentation from the architects, from Jordan from Modular Studios. That gets us on to introductions. Jordan, would you like to say hello?
Hello, I'm Jordan McElroy, Senior Project Architect at Modular Studio.
And we also have an architect from Modular Studio. We have Lucas. Do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Lucas Kruszynski. I'm Director of Modular Studio involved in the project. And
unfortunately, Mark Pender from PBM Planning, the planning consultants, cannot join us this evening. But as I said earlier on, we're happy to kind of meet out in person. And if there are any questions that aren't answered this evening, we'll happily respond to you via email, phone, or in person or post. So I think we are ready to start with this evening's presentation.
Yeah, thanks Raj for the introductions, and thanks again to everyone for taking the time to join. As Raj mentioned, we'll just talk through the proposals in a bit more detail, and we'll start with the existing context, both physical and planning policy context, and then we'll move on to looking at the design in a little bit more detail. Just like to say that a project like this is very much a team effort, requires input from a number of specialist consultants with a range of skills. And I'll just take a moment to introduce the project team. Our client is Sewardstone Holdings, who have a background in delivering high quality new build residential schemes in North West and East London. Architects are myself and Lucas from Modular Studio. We specialize in residential architecture and have broad experience delivering schemes through planning and construction stages, both London-wide and beyond. PPM Planning, Mark Pender unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening, but Mark provides expert planning advice on local and national policy and has an in-depth knowledge of the planning process itself. Transport consultants are TTP, who are experts in transport planning and provide input on cycle and vehicle parking, as well as refuse collection. FDS are highly qualified and experienced fire engineers with a broad experience of developing fire strategies across all building typologies. EB7 are specialists in the planning issues of daylight and sunlight, both of which are critical in residential design, and they also provide strategies for sustainable design, employing green technologies with low environmental impact. And finally, Tim Moya Associates. TMA are leading environmental practice and provide landscaping architectural design as well as arboricultural advice. So that's advice on trees. Just to take a little look at the wider context of the site, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's located in Chingford in the north of the London Borough of Waltham Forest. From a public transport perspective, the site is approximately 10-minute bus journey or a 20-minute walk to Chingford Station, where you can get to Liverpool Street via the overground in approximately 30 minutes. To the west, Ponders End Station is about 10 minutes by bus or approximately 20 minutes walk, and trains in a southerly direction connect to Stratford with connections beyond to central London. There's also good bus links in the wider area to Chingford Centre and Walthamstow Central, and Enfield and Harlow in the wider area. And it's also, interestingly, about 45 minutes cycle to Stratford if you were to take a route down past the reservoirs through Walthamstow wetlands and into Hackney Marshes, where, of course, you come to the Olympic Park as well as all the amenity at Stratford. It's interesting, the site is quite close to what can be referred to as green and blue amenity, the blue being the nearby reservoirs and the green being, in this instance, Epping Forest. So I think you'd all agree it's quite a good location to live. Zooming into the site itself and look at the immediate surrounding context. So the site is located on the southwest corner of the junction between Sewardstone Road, Kingshead Hill and Lee Valley Road. In planning terms, the area has been identified by the local council as being a future neighbourhood centre and also a gateway to the borough. So quite a significant junction. Architecturally speaking, the junction is quite disjointed, with the western side occupied by the McDonald's and a petrol station, both of which are quite low rise, and a 7-story residential block to the south of that. And these buildings are all fairly far set back from the road, fairly far. A motor point behind on this side is effectively a huge car lot. On the eastern side, you have the application site on the south side of the junction, which we'll come to in a moment. And on the north side of that, a post-war modernist development of 3 stories. And just to give you a flavour, which again, I'm sure you're familiar with some of the surrounding architectural context, some of the typical two-story suburban semi-detached and detached houses, which are effectively many are 3-story given the dormer extensions to the rear, but also these larger post-war blocks, which are the tall block of flats just referred to on opposite the site, and the building on the corner of Kingshead Hill. And these are typically larger both in scale and height and footprint than the more suburban typologies. The application site itself, it was previously occupied by a 1930s retail parade, which was more or less identical to the one to the south at 52 to 58 Sewardstone Road. This retail parade was comprised of 8 plots, each with a retail unit at ground floor and a residential duplex above. The frontages were typically traditional, with the first floor from red brick and bay windows, and the second floor was within a mansard or Dutch type roof with clay tiles and dormer windows. At the front, you've got quite a deep pavement, and in top right image, you can just see that was often used for informal car parking and was not ideal. Following the demolition of this retail parade, the site has been cleared and currently lies empty behind hoarding. And just to look at some of the existing and emerging planning policy context, just to give you an idea of where we're coming from. So the UK government target is to build 300,000 homes a year in the UK wide. Within London Borough of Waltham Forest, the council's target is to provide 27,000 new homes by the year 2035. And in support of that, the council have recently published their draft site allocation document, which forms part of the draft local plan, which is currently out for consultation. This document sets out the council's preference for what should be delivered on various sites across the borough, and the application site is included within that in that site allocations document. And you can just see the excerpt from that document. It states that the site has the capacity to provide a minimum of 40 new homes, the re-provision of almost 500 square meters of retail space, and also there's an opportunity to upgrade and improve the junction more generally. Another document, again, draft format, but in the public domain, and that informs the aforementioned site allocation study is the Waltham Forest Skyline study. This assesses the impact of the site allocations document and the target for new homes on the skyline at various sites across the borough. So if you just look at the plan on the left of the slide, you see that the application site is marked number 3 on the right of the plan. It's noted in this document as having the capacity for up to 7 stories, and the site opposite, which is marked number 1, is currently the McDonald's and the Motor Point site, which is noted as having the capacity for up to 8 stories. And interestingly, the 2 asterisks on that plan mark the possible location of taller buildings, which could be anything up to 13 and 17 stories respectively. So a step up in scale. With regards to previous site-specific planning applications, there was an approval on site, which you may or may not be aware of, which was to reconfigure and extend the previous existing retail parade. This involved extending the ground floor at the rear to provide almost 600 square meters of retail space, and also the removal of the roof and the addition of 2 new stories. And that would have created 17 new homes. That would have been a mix of flats and 2-story duplex units. And there are elements of this proposal that we would like to take forward into the new proposals, namely the improved retail offering at ground floor and the improvements to the public realm, so the pavement to the front, where we had proposed a safe and segregated cycleway, planting and an upgraded lay-by. And so with the context in mind, I'll just move on to talk a little bit more about the proposals in more detail. In March of last year, 2021, we made a submission to Waltham Forest for pre-application advice. Having carried out a feasibility study assessing various scenarios or options, it was decided that we would approach the council with 2 options for the site. Main reason for this being that we wanted to work with the council to find out what would be deemed the most suitable solution for the site, given the aforementioned policy context, but also its significant location on a major junction within the borough. And testing these options was effectively looking at how the ground floor works and the best way to deliver high quality housing at upper levels. So option 1 looked at ground floor retail, extending the full depth of the ground floor plan. Access to the residential levels and the bin stores in this option would be located on Sewardstone Road, so servicing for bin stores would be from the front, from the deep pavement. At the rear, the residence bike store would be located externally, adjacent to what would be an external communal or play area. And adjacent to this, we were proposing 14 residence car parking spaces, which was the same number as the previous planning consent. At upper levels, the residential offering would be fully flatted, with all apartments accessed off internal corridors, and the provision here was for 47 new homes, and the massing was stepped at 8 down to 4 and up again to 6 stories. The second design option at pre-application stage was it was a bit simpler in terms of massing. It was looking at a 5-story and a 10-story element, with the lower 5-story element tying into the retail parade on the south and the taller element addressing the corner on the junction. Access to the residential levels would be located on the north and southern gable ends, and that would free up the frontage for commercial or retail use. Here, the southern core offers a mix of flats and duplexes, and these are all accessed off a gallery, with the tall element on the corner being fully flatted and all of these accessed from an internal corridor. And locate in this option, locating the communal space or play area at 5th floor level allowed for creation of 20 car parking spaces at the ground floor and at the rear. This was also helped. We also helped maximize the parking by putting the bike store within the ground floor footprint in this option. So following a meeting with the council, we presented them with both options. We received written feedback as well as verbal feedback that option 2 would be the preferred option, but with some amendments going forward. In design terms, they were namely to reduce the height, which we did by 2 stories. You see the image on the left with the top image, the red outline was the pre-application scheme versus the revised scheme. The elevation designs were to be further developed. We approached pre-app without having fully resolved elevations to understand what was the best option before we pushed that forward. We were advised to avoid the use of overuse of full height glazing, which can lead to issues of privacy and overheating and negatively impact the appearance from the street, and to use obscure glass balustrades, again for privacy reasons for residents. Other items were namely that the servicing should take place from within the site, so therefore within the red line boundary of the site, as it were, not from the front, and to relocate the play area to the ground floor, and also that the ground floor retail offering should be split into smaller units rather than 1, 2, or 3 larger units. So we did take all of those items on board, which we'll come to shortly. But just to illustrate the potential impact of the skyline study on the junction and the context within which we were working. Just bear in mind, this is our sort of very rough mock-up of this and not a final vision, or not council's final vision for the junction, but it does look to a step up in scale and how we might work within that. So as I said, we were looking at a part 5 and a part 8 story proposal. The skyline study proposed a uniform 7-story building, but we looked at a broken mass with the 5-story element relating to the lower buildings to the south on Sewardstone Road. And then that steps down to 3 stories on Laurel Gardens to respect the neighbours. And then the tall element is on the corner of the junction. Reason being that any overshadowing caused by this, you can see, will fall on the junction and the roads throughout the day rather than falling on the neighbouring gardens or residential properties. And again, focusing the height on one portion of the site allows the neighbouring properties to have views out and over and around, rather than having, one slab block, as it were, at 7 stories. And following the revision, just to point out that the section along the bottom and the 2 images, the top left image, that the proposals are now reduced to the same height to the top of the existing 7-story block across the way and to the south on Sewardstone Road. And again, just testing some of the key views against the council's skyline study and what we felt might work better, by again focusing the height on one section of the site rather than having what would be a uniform mass, which would negatively impact the neighbouring properties, but not relate to the buildings to the south. And you can see how we do break the council's line on the north of the building, but we're significantly below it for a significant portion or the majority of the site. And again, just testing the same view looking north and the same principles, pulling the height to the corner. And just a little bit of a look in more detail at how the floor plans work. The ground floor plan is effectively split in two, with the ancillary spaces or the service spaces pushed to the back, and that allows the entire ground floor frontage to be used for retail. And it activates the whole frontage and will bring life to the street, we would hope. The retail offering is currently being shown as being split into 5 units with a range of sizes, and this is something that we took on board from the council's feedback from the pre-application schemes. The back half of the ground floor plan, as it were, contains the access to the residential upper levels, bike and bin stores for residents, which we'll come to in more detail. And at the rear, externally, you have the residence play space, again located at ground floor, taking on board council's advice, as well as the residence car parking spaces, with the vehicular access to these being from Laurel Gardens. And a general arrangement of the residential upper levels. So we'd be seeking across the sort of 5 and 8-story elements to provide 41 new homes, and there'd be a mix of 2-story houses or duplexes and flats. And we would want to provide a good range of homes, a mix of 1 to 3 bed, with up to 6 people, to provide a good mix that provides meets the need for family housing in the borough, as well as a need for housing for couples as well. All of the apartments we would will have dual or corner aspect. That is to say, they'll have outlook in 2 directions and assist with natural ventilation and maximize light. And all of the homes would have their own private external amenity space, and that's in addition to the ground floor play space and the communal 5th floor space, which we'll come to in a moment. All of the homes have been designed with accessibility in mind, and 10% of these will be fully wheelchair accessible. In terms of external appearance, the elevation strategy, or the design of the elevation, is loosely based on the 8 plots that make up the site, or the 8 plots that made up the retail parade that previously occupied the site. And that kind of ties it into the surrounding context with the still existing retail parade to the south. And while we have 2 distinct elements of the 5 and the 8-story, the aim was to tie those together so that they had a similar architectural language. So the 5-story portion, which is more akin or like a terrace typology, we've used the opening sizes and aperture sizes of this and applied it to the taller element and wrapped that around the side. So you have a unified elevation across all sides of the building, despite the differing heights. In terms of material, brick is the surrounding dominant material, in particular red and brown brick, and that goes for the sort of pre and interwar suburban housing, as well as the post-war modernist blocks. And the previous building on site was also a red brick. So you look to utilize brick for these reasons, but also it's an incredibly robust material given the location on a busy junction, and should also point out that it's also fire retardant. We would look to use different brick colors with the projecting ground floor of shop frontage and balcony bays of the taller element in a darker, more brown shade of brick, and the setback elements in a different tone, just to add some interest. And the window openings would be designed as infill, or what we call spandrel panels of single and double height. And these would be proposed to be from a green or olive green aluminium, and some banding at alternating floors. Brick banding just adds a little bit of interest. In terms of landscaping and ground floor, the proposals also include upgrades to the public highway. So the area to the front of the site that is within the orange line, we would be proposing to work with the council with in order to upgrade that. So working from Sewardstone Road back, you see we would be providing car parking for the retail, along with a planted verge, and then inset from that a safe cycle lane, and then a deep pavement at the front of the commercial frontage. At the rear, you have the residence play area with various items for play for children of the development. And all of this we would be proposing high quality materials and finishes suitable for either pedestrian or vehicular traffic as is required. Mentioned a communal terrace at 5th floor previously. This is again a planning requirement, and this is something that would be open to all accessible and usable to all residents of the scheme, and would be characterized by planting and seating and high quality materials and finishes. And just to point out that the usable space at this level would be set back from the parapet by 1.5 meters, just to ensure that the privacy of the neighboring gardens, particularly at the back of the site. In terms of refuse, both of the cores serving the residential uppers are provided with a bin store, and these are suitably positioned to minimize the carrying distance for residents from their front doors. And the strategy would be to have a temporary holding store, which is in yellow on the floor plan, located on Laurel Gardens, and this would be fully secure. So on days when the rubbish is to be collected, building management would transfer the bins from the residential bin stores to the holding store, and once they're collected by the refuse or bin lorries, they would be transferred back immediately. So they will only be in the holding store on the day of collection. And as I said, the temporary holding store will be fully enclosed and within masonry, so brickwork, so that it's completely secure, and the doors would be secure. And we would have the doors set flush with the building line, which ensures no setback or inlet, which would encourage dumping or fly tipping. In terms of car parking, as I said, the parking for the retail will be at the front, where there'll be 3 car parking spaces, one of which would be a DDA, that's a disabled car parking space. And in the back, you have the residence car parking, which is provision of 10 spaces, including 3 disabled car parking spaces. And then the area just to the right of the car parking spaces between the parking bays and the play area is a zone for delivery trucks or delivery vans that are servicing the ground floor and making deliveries to reverse and turn and come out. With regards to electric vehicle, we would be seeking to provide a minimum of 20%. So currently two spaces would be provided with electric vehicle charging points, but they would be designed so that all spaces could be converted or accommodate electric vehicle charging points at some point down the line. Cycle parking for residents is located at the rear of the ground floor, just highlighted in sort of red or pink on the floor plan, and we provided 76 cycle parking spaces in line with all relevant standards, with a mix of different formats to meet different needs and wants. So if you don't want to sort of park your bike up high, you have the option to lock it at ground floor on what's called a Sheffield stand. The cycle parking for the retail will be located at ground floor to the front, and again will just be provided through Sheffield stands. In terms of sustainability, which is something that is always at the forefront of what we do, we start and design the building so that we can incorporate a number of key passive design measures, and these are referred to earlier: dual aspect, which maximizes access to natural light and ventilation. We have limited south-facing glazing, which minimizes, along with inset balconies, minimizes the risks of overheating. And we're also promoting sustainable transport through cycle parking provision and the creation of the cycle lane to the front. On the roof portion of the tall air element, we'll have photovoltaic panels, and zero emissions air source heat pumps are also proposed. In addition to that, urban greening with increased trees and planting both ground floor and green roofs, and planting on the communal terrace just reduces water runoff and limits the impact on local sewage systems and drainage systems. High performance wall and roof insulation and high performance aluminium windows are also proposed, and that just reduces the need for over reliance on heating and fossil fuels. In summary, we'd just like to say that the proposals are for a high quality mixed use development. There's a creation of 5 new ground floor retail commercial units on Sewardstone Road, upgrades and improvements to the public realm on Sewardstone Road, with provision of 41 new homes with a good mix offering to suit a range of needs. Provision of secure parking and refuse store for all residents, and provision of shared spaces for residents in the form of the ground floor play area and the communal terrace at 5th floor. And we feel it's an appropriate response, irrespective of council's draft policies for the site opposite. We feel it's a suitable response to the junction location of the site, and responds to the various contextual considerations around the site boundaries. Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan, for that. So we've had, there are 20 or so questions that have come up on screen. So just to remind you that there is the function on the Q&A section here where you can ask further questions. We'll try to answer them all this evening. There was a kind of message sent on the chat function to let you know that we're happy to kind of meet you in person as well, and send out hard copies of tonight's presentation as well. But I'm going to start off with, so initially there was someone here who asked a question earlier in regards to what my role is and what Jordan's role is. Just for someone who missed a part of the session earlier on, my name is Raj Mandar from Huddle Communications, and I've been organising the consultation so far. So hopefully you received a letter or leaflet from myself. Jordan and Lucas and Ahmed as well are from Modular Studios, the architects. First question that comes up is in regards to the level of affordable housing that is going to be provided, and also someone else has asked, will these be private homes or council property? I'm happy to take that one on. As alongside with the planning application as well, we're required to make a contribution towards affordable housing. As part of the application, there is a viability study that is undertaken to determine the level of affordable housing that should be provided as part of this application. I understand that we're looking to, we're making those studies are being made undertaken right now, and then they get assessed by the council as well. But we are looking at making an affordable housing contribution towards the proposal itself. I think that's a fair answer there. Would you agree with that, Jordan?
Yeah. I think in short, there will be an affordable housing offering or portion of the scheme. Just what the final figure or numbers are unknown at this stage, but we will know in coming weeks. And just moving on in terms of, and just a little bit about the process, because some of people who have asked. So this was the second of consultation sessions. We did one back in December, and we're still going to be looking to meet with residents further. We're looking at making a submission of a planning application next month, and then that goes to another consultation run by the council, Waltham Forest Council themselves, and then a determination by the planning committee, which we expect a few months down the line from there. So you're looking at kind of early summer really for a decision to be made, and then there are kind of
Then there's kind of a period of time where the kind of a legal agreement is made in regards to Section 106, and that takes a few months, 6 months time, and I wouldn't expect anything to really start if all things go well until the end of 2022 in that sense. And there's a question here in regards to the type of materials that we're looking to use. Jordan, do you want to talk a little bit further about the materials we're looking to use?
Sure. Predominantly, the building is proposed to be finished in brick, and typically a red and a brown brick. We're kind of looking at the surrounding area and the different bricks that have been used. And again, I mentioned the previous building. So at ground floor, you can see that the commercial level is sort of demarcated by a darker brick, and this taller sort of projecting balcony frontage on this element is also a dark brick. And then the setback is the setback elements are also from brick, but maybe more of a reddish orange color, whereas the other brick would be more of a slightly darker reddish brown. This will be kind of to be confirmed in due course, just the exact specification of the brick. But effectively, for all intents and purposes, it's a red brick building. The sort of the green we're proposing are typically panels that are made from aluminium, and quite common on contemporary buildings or modern buildings, like large infill panels that can be whatever color anyone likes. And sometimes if you see the image here, this is typical aluminium window frame with a panel below, and this is the kind of thing that we'd be going for. The balustrades and privacy screens would be from obscure glass. Reason for that being that it means people on the street can't see onto someone's private terrace. So there's an element of screening there. If sometimes you see developments and they have metal railings, but the problem with that is then that people deploy their own privacy measures and there's no consistency in the appearance of the building. So that was just something that we took on board from the pre-application process and feedback from the council.
And in terms of, so we're talking about design as well, relation to kind of affordable housing. So in terms of, someone's asked that affordable housing is set to be set at 50%. No, I think at the previous consultation session, we said that is yet to be determined by the viability study that takes place at submission. But we are looking to provide affordable housing on site. Do we have an idea of where we would be looking to provide affordable housing on the site?
Yes, we had discussed the possibility of the southern core, so that would be the lower element, being perhaps part of that being handed over to the affordable provision, namely because it's where you have larger family type units with more bedrooms and can accommodate more people.
Thank you. And we will get on to, there are a number of questions that come in also in regard to the impact of Laurel Gardens. We'll get on to that in a moment or so. So there've been a number of questions that are asking about the retail offer on the ground floor. So I don't know if it's an appropriate slide there on the ground floor. So some of the questions are asked, so someone's asked what kind of shops are planned. That is part of the scope of this consultation, by the way. Someone has asked what type of shops will there be, and I think there's also a question in regards to parking, but I'll answer that in a moment or so as well. So going to you, Jordan, in terms of the type of retail units that we're looking to bring about.
Okay, well, I'll just sort of start, because I understand that the size of the retail units is kind of coming up again and again, and we did have on the previous application, for example, a 250 square meter co-op store proposed. When we approached the council at pre-application stage, we we didn't show the ground floor commercial offering as being subdivided into any number of units, because we will take advice from the planners at council on that. They fed back to us that the preference from their point of view would be for smaller retail units, by way of offering an opportunity for more independent retailers to occupy the spaces. And the thinking being that smaller spaces will, one, kind of activate the street in a more animated way. It will attract more people on foot. Whereas if you had a large supermarket, that you might attract more parking to the deep pavement at the front and cause some congestion around. And they also, the deliveries and traffic that is generated by smaller units means smaller vans often, whereas larger supermarket type offering means larger vehicles visiting more often. So that is council's position on that. I understand that there's perhaps some interest from a cafe for one of the units, although details are to be confirmed. And with the remaining four, we just don't know at this stage what they could be or what they would be.
And that's something that we're being guided by in terms of officers themselves. And one thing I can also just add to that, I think there has been also interest from a supermarket in relation to the site as well. So going on to talk about Laurel Gardens here. So we've got a number of questions here. Questions in regard, here's a question that's asking what considerations have been made for the privacy of Laurel Gardens residents in their gardens, and the images show balconies on the 7 stories overlooking houses 1, 2, 3, and 4 gardens, Laurel Gardens, I think that's. And I'm just going to go to another question. Whilst, if you can perhaps go to a slide that looks at Laurel Gardens in terms of does the visuals we've got at the moment, further work has been done on the visuals, the view from Laurel Gardens, and they will also be shared with residents of Laurel Gardens as well. And as I said, I've met a couple of residents, see some people who are online, happy to meet them again on person as we're getting more and more information in regards to the proposals. And there are some questions we'll get onto in a moment as well in regards to the impact of parking as well in the area, and the impact there'll be on Laurel Gardens. So Jordan, in terms of daylight and sunlight and privacy concerns that have been raised for Laurel Gardens?
I think with regards to daylight and sunlight and any overshadowing on gardens or external amenity space or whatnot, we have run this, we have tested the scheme, and a specialist consultant, I mentioned EB7 at the outset. As part of their report, they assessed the impact of the scheme on amenity space, and we can say that with certainty that the scheme meets all relevant requirements, and there is no overshadowing or impact on neighboring amenity. With regards to privacy and overlooking, we would look to add, there are you can just see some balconies on this rear wing, where we would be adding privacy screens to prevent any direct overlooking both onto the gardens of the properties at Laurel Gardens, or this one on King's Head Hill, and also that prevent any overlooking between balconies within the scheme. Again, I mentioned the communal 5th floor terrace, whereby the usable space is offset from the edge of the building, which prevents anyone getting too close and looking directly into neighboring gardens. So we have considered that and considered the distances. If felt necessary, we can review that again and perhaps look at use of additional privacy screens to prevent any areas of concern.
And in regards, so we, in regards to daylight and sunlight as well, so the way in which it's been designed has been to kind of mitigate the impact of any impact of daylight sunlight to those who on Laurel Gardens, but that report has still been worked up. That report's been worked up at the moment. We're happy to share that with residents of Sewardstone Road as well.
The report is actually complete, and we have demonstrated that we do comply with all of the necessary requirements, and it will be in the public domain after the full application is made.
And but once again, I'm happy to discuss that with residents as well following today's session in regards to a copy of the daylight and sunlight report. In terms, so I hope that answers the question there. So talking about Laurel Gardens as well. Oh, quick question in regards to what are the general heights of regards to privacy screens?
The privacy screens in planning terms are 1.7 meters in height from a finished floor level.
So that is just under 6 foot. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of going back to Laurel Gardens, so the impact on servicing, so how, been a question that's been raised also last time as well. So the kind of bin and refuse strategy, how do you ensure that one, there isn't an impact on residents, and that the bins aren't simply just kind of left out and going to lead to further kind of fly tipping?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think that is really a management issue, and there will be a management plan in place for the building, and the responsibilities for whoever transfers bins to the holding store and back again will be required to do that on the day of refuse collection, so the day the bin lorries come. In Mark's absence, perhaps Lucas might be able to suggest as well that would probably be secured by way of a planning condition.
Yes, the refuse strategy will be part of the document submitted, so they'll be secured by condition and further details provided as well.
Yeah. So I guess the provision the provision of the temporary holding store is being designed so as to accommodate the total number of bins that are currently on site within the ground floor plan. So there won't be any sort of bins left out or kind of rolling around, because they can all be accommodated, and building management will be required by the planning permission and the planning consent to implement the strategy.
Okay. So in terms of, there's a question here that, are you looking to go any higher? No, we're not. And just going back to, because most of this does relate to the impact of Laurel Gardens. So question here is, do we think that the level of car parking spaces is sufficient? So someone else here has asked whether there are actually 20 car parking spaces or that there are 10 car parking spaces. Jordan, can you confirm that there are 10 plus 3? Am I right in saying?
There are 10 plus, there are 10 residential in the rear, including these 3 disabled bays, and then 3 for the commercial premises to the front in a lay-by on Sewardstone Road.
And why is it that we're kind of providing kind of 10 car parking, so few car parking spaces? I think that's one of the concerns that residents have in terms of the limited number of car parking spaces that are being provided.
In a nutshell, it was really this is determined and dictated by the feedback that we received and discussions that we had with council, and their insistence that we should be reducing the car parking provision, and I guess that feeds into the promotion of more sustainable means of transport, be it public transport or walking or cycling. And one of the measures that they are using to implement this is car parking provision on site of
And
new developments.
quick question here. Someone has referred to that there was a reference to 20 car parking spaces
Yeah,
earlier on in your presentation.
they are correct. On design option 2 at pre-application stage, we offered 20 car parking spaces at ground floor plan, but the feedback from the council was that we should be seeking to minimize the car parking spaces on site.
And in terms of that feedback, that's from the Waltham Forest Council's planning department. So that's the pre-application process.
It's from their highways officer within the planning department. Yes.
Okay.
That's also driven by the sort of London plan, London-wide policy that is being adopted that requires new developments to be car-free. So that is just coming from above.
Mm.
And in terms of we're just going to move on. So we've just talked about parking and the concerns that people raise in relation to parking. Explain why is that we're proposing the number that we are. Can we explain why we're providing what some might feel are so many cycle parking spaces? I think we're looking at providing 78?
76.
76, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Again, Lucas just made reference to the London Plan, which is a document that sets out guidance and standards with regards to residential development within Greater London. And the majority or most councils, including Waltham Forest, adopt the London Plan cycling standards. And again, is about promotion of green, sustainable travel, which promotes healthy living and reduce emissions from vehicular traffic, et cetera. So it's something like the car parking that comes from above, essentially, and you will find it in all new residential developments, the same level of cycle parking.
And some residents in regards to kind of the kind of topography of the area, has that been taken into account? So when they're kind of Transport for London take their kind of PTAL rating and or the kind of the idea that an area should include kind of more cycle or encourage cycling in such an area. Has that been taken into account by them?
I don't believe PTAL factors topography and changes in level into the assessment.
Okay, but it is something that's kind of been led by Transport for London and the
Mayor's office.
And the Mayor's office.
Maybe one thing that can help with the topography, we following last consultation, we'll be adding sort of charging points maybe to the cycle storage, so electric bikes can be used and utilized, and I'm sure that will help with the topography. And
I understand that as part of the application, there'll be a kind of a transport report that will be submitted as well, and that'll be also can be shared with residents alongside that, which takes into account with parking. A question that is asked is, what happens to residents? Where will they park if someone who lives in the development has a car?
I think we would refer to the transport report based on that. Like I say, the parking provision is dictated by the local authority rather than ourselves, and the policy is to reduce dependence or overuse of cars, and we would also seek, for example, to make a contribution to a car club, where users who didn't have a car can make use of, for example, Zipcar, which significantly reduces the need for on-site parking. And
going back to also, transport seems to be the hot topic. There are other questions out there as well. So someone is asking in regards to the suggestion that from the site to Chingford Station, it's a 20-minute walk, and once again taking into account with the hill. Do we have an idea of where that assessment is made at all?
When carrying out the studies, we use Google Maps to draw information that we feed into our reports, which is found its way into this presentation. From personal experience, I can say that it's about a 21 or 22-minute walk from Chingford Station to the site.
And so, okay, I'm just moving on to some of the other questions. I appreciate there are some questions in regards to transport in terms of car ownership, and I think that's been had a look at. Going back to Laurel Gardens, why is it that we're looking to hold the bin store on Laurel Gardens, and which is kind of a small road, and why can't the bin be held, the bin store be held on Sewardstone Road on the opposite side?
Yes, again, the feedback from the pre-application process, where we did present the alternative scenarios for where the bin stores should be and how they should be serviced. The feedback from the council was that the servicing should take place within the site, and it's not actually possible to get a refuse truck into the site. So we were looking at an alternative strategy. Now, the reason the council want to remove the bin stores from Sewardstone Road, or the Sewardstone Road side, which seems like the most arguably logical place to have it, is because they, I guess they are wanting to create an active street, and that feeds back into their requirement or their request for five smaller retail units, whereby you have a bit more of an active frontage with different shops providing different offerings and people coming and going. And if you have a bin store and the entrance to the flats kind of puncturing that, as it were, it detracts from from what they would refer to as a street scene. So I think it's a combination of the highways department and the design officer at the council sort of prioritizing the street scene and the public domain, or the public realm, which is the pavement in this case.
And so in terms of the kind of number of car, going back to some of these other questions that will come back as well, in terms of whether there's the enough kind of car parking provision for the shops or for the residents as well, we're required to submit a kind of a transport report, and that in itself gets assessed by the council as well. Someone here has asked what it looks like that we're building a substantial number of additional residences than are required. Why is this? I think we're going to look back at something that's been consulted on at the moment, which I think is the part of the kind of silent allocation that the council, which is kind of part of the direction of travel. It's not been adopted just yet, but the council are kind of seeking, am I right in saying it was 40 homes they were looking for the site?
Yes, that document states a minimum of 40 homes. And again, this comes back to the current shortage of housing and homes in the UK, and the current UK government's target to build 300,000 homes a year, which I guess then is broken down and allocated to various locations and councils and local authorities across the country, who each then sort of have their own targets to meet. I guess Waltham Forest, if you look at this document, you'll see a number of sites, and those sites are noted and described in the way this one is. And if London Borough Waltham Forest's aim is to build 27,000 new homes over the course of the next 13 years. I guess this document assesses where they could potentially be built and provided. So it's really a question of mathematics.
Why is it that we're making reference to this document? Because even though it's still in consultation at the moment, I understand because it demonstrates at the moment the council's kind of direction of travel, and let's say a decision is made in regards to this application, or when it is being deliberated upon ahead of the completion of the consultation and the adoption of the site allocation, it will be given some weight, but not complete weight as it would be as if it was adopted. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think that, interestingly, it is a draft document out for consultation. Expectation is that it will be adopted this coming year or within this year. And also the feedback that we received, the written feedback that we received from the council during the pre-application process refers us to this document for guidance. So in conjunction with the existing current local plan. So it is still, while it's not been adopted yet, a relevant document, and the studies associated with it that inform it are arguably relevant documents that inform, or already informing what people like ourselves are doing.
And going back, there are a lot of kind of comments in regards to your views on the 20-minute walk. I have been in the area. I have met with some residents of Laurel Gardens who've expressed concerns in regard to the parking situation and interest in regards to what the retail units are, and also relation to the height. But I'm happy to, I'm not the fittest person myself. I'm happy to give that a go as well when I come by later this week. But going back to height. Going back to height, I was going to ask, why is it that we consider it to be in the local, or how can you expect it to be in keeping the local area when it's actually taller than anything that's currently in the vicinity? So that's certainly an architect's question, I feel, in terms of how does it respond to the local context?
I guess the query is largely in regards to the height, and we have an eight-story building, or we're proposing an eight-story building. But if you look across the road at I think it's called Wingrove House, you have, for all intents and purposes, an eight-story building existing and already there in the locale. So we're matching, and you can see on this image, top left, just an indication of the heights of those buildings in the main image, and as well in the section or across the street, which shows Wingrove House in the background, and the height of presumably the lift overrun and water tower, more or less exactly matching the height of what we are proposing. So there is precedent for sort of mid-rise buildings already in the locale. We are putting that taller element on the junction because, as discussed earlier, we said we can then adopt a more neighbourly approach with the southern half of the building, whereby you have the 5-story element, which relates to the retail parade to the south, and then that steps down to 4 stories, 3 stories, and then ties into the neighbouring, effectively 2-story building. I think it's number 1, Laurel Gardens. In terms of just how that's further refined, if you look at the setback on the corner here, we're kind of pulling the building back at 5th floor level, and that is pulled back at 4th floor level as well, so that the building at this southern end ties in directly and steps down gradually to the height of the retail parade, rather than just coming, and stopping at 5 stories at the gable. And then the mass of the corner, or the 8-story element, is sort of broken, and it's pushed and pulled and set back, so that it's not just one huge kind of block that's been dropped there. The projecting shop frontage lines through with the retail parade to the south, and matches more or less exactly what was there before. And then the building above 1st floor at the 5-story element is set back to the same line of the building line of the retail parade. So, while it is a step up in scale, it's still sort of tied into and respects the surrounding context with all these various sort of elements. And then the design of the elevation goes further to kind of break it down even further.
And just going on in regards to height, so you've got those buildings there that aren't built yet, but they are, as part, am I right in saying that they are part of the kind of the council's draft site allocation document as well, and it is the council's kind of desire for bringing those bringing kind of taller elements to Chingford as well, and that comes into it as well, and that's a factor in regards to as well as the kind of looking to deliver 41 homes there as well, and some of the existing buildings you've mentioned. That's the rationale behind the proposed height.
Yes, that is correct. We also feel it's a fairly suitable scale for the junction. If you look at the size of the junction and the area of road and pavement, then a building at 8 stories in height is actually quite appropriate given the deep pavements and the widths of the road. And like I said earlier, this isn't necessarily our vision. It's just a quick mock-up to understand, what might the future of the junction be, given the site allocations document, the skyline study, and the designation as a neighborhood center. So it becomes more like a sort of a little sort of kind of urban center rather than sort of disjointed car park and junction that it is at the moment.
Okay. And then so there were some questions in regard, some of the benefits of the scheme itself, or the scheme. The site has been vacant for some time, and I know there are those who've raised the history of the site in regard to the demolition of the previous sets of buildings, but the delivery of homes on the site is something that the council are looking to achieve, as well as the retail space on the ground floor, as well as that, the affordable homes. 2 questions in relation to that. Are there balconies on the side overlooking the houses on Sewardstone Road? So I think I can see some balconies there, but in terms of, are they overlooking residential in terms of on Sewardstone Road?
On Sewardstone Road, the only residential property is the 7-story building opposite.
And the separation's quite a distance, isn't it? And then the separation's quite a big distance as well. Am I right in saying that? In terms of...
between these 2 buildings, yes. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I can certainly get an answer to that. Yeah.
And there was another additional question in regards to how do you ensure that the play area, is managed and that it's only used by the residents?
Yeah, we have spoken with the designing out crime officer at London Met regarding the schemes, and he has made several proposals or recommendations that we will feed into our final drawings and report as to how to keep the play area safe and secure. And they include sort of boundary treatments and fob access and other such matters. And I think the fact that it is at ground floor also encourages more passive overlooking. So there are rooms and balconies looking onto it. So there's an element of if someone's child is playing there, they can keep an eye on them.
And thanks, Jordan. And in terms of, I went back and mentioned benefits, one thing I kind of didn't mention was the kind of community infrastructure levy that is worked out. It's a financial contribution that the development makes towards the council, which is worked out on the kind of on the size of development, and that is used by the council to make contributions to the likes of GP surgeries, to education services as well. I realise there's a question here in regards to retail. Someone here has suggested the idea of some sort of bakery. As I mentioned, the council kind of keen of kind of independent retail on the ground floor, and I appreciate there are residents who are keen. Residents are keen on kind of a supermarket as well. In terms of communication that we've kind of had so far. That is in regards to kind of parking, as mentioned, it's the planning officers and those were in the planning document, planning department itself. Here's a question back here, going back to those, the how can the playground be looked over if privacy screens are up? So is that right? So were you not talking about privacy screens, particularly overlooking towards Laurel Gardens?
Yes, that's correct. Sort of, there will be balconies that sort of overlook the play area, but also privacy screens are more aimed at the providing privacy for outlook in this direction towards the rear gardens of number 1 Laurel Gardens and this property on King's Head Hill, whereas there will be some overlooking permitted from balconies onto the play space. And also you have a gallery access or deck access to the rear where people will be sort of coming and going, and that sort of offers another means of passive surveillance.
And another set of questions in regards to the kind of red buildings that kind of and some of the, perhaps some of the red lines. That's where the kind of motor point site is. So there's kind of, I think those are buildings that are kind of have been identified in the site allocation document, am I right in saying? So there, and we're not involved with any of those plans themselves. We, in terms of how you've kind of, those are kind of rudimentary kind of design blocks, right?
I mean, we're sort of looking at primarily, as I said, these are not our proposals. It's not something we're involved in. It's merely our interpretation of what's in the site allocations, and well, more likely this the skyline study, and we are looking at primarily what is the impact on the sort of scale of the junction and the scale of buildings around the junction, and what might it do to the streets, to the street scene, and how might it frame the junction, rather than, you know, looking in detail at the design of individual buildings. Here is just a mock-up by us.
And in terms of there was, so a couple of questions in regards, so I mentioned that in terms of how long that we're expected to finish, we're looking at kind of perhaps some work on the site being started at the end of 2022, but perhaps 18 months from there, I want to say 18 months to 2 years kind of process in terms of kind of completion, because there's no kind of demolition here involved, but something along those lines. In terms of the Shell petrol station and the Waitrose, we're not involved with anything on those sites, so we'd probably say yes, that they are to how we understand at the moment to remain. There was a question in regards to use of local suppliers. So I imagine we would look to kind of work with the local supply chain and local kind of workforce as well. I'm not so sure in the case of Waltham Forest, but I know of other local authorities it's sometimes a requirement in terms of use of local labour as well. You know, going back in regards to some of the questions that are asked about the retail options, you know, there are those who are kind of keen of bringing back particularly the council and the introduction of a butcher or a baker or the post office or kind of a supermarket. The council kind of keen of bringing that type of retail and helping rejuvenate the retail offer along Sewardstone Road. And sorry, in regards to the balconies on the side overlooking the houses on Sewardstone Road, this would be to the right of the building if you're looking at it towards Waltham Way. I'm right in saying that's further along. I don't think that there were balconies overlooking on that side. You able to have a look, Jordan?
I mean, there are certainly balconies on Sewardstone Road. This is Sewardstone Road here, and they do overlook Sewardstone Road. This is King's Head Hill, so there are some balconies on the rear wing that runs parallel to that. They look to within the site, and will be treated with privacy screening. So I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure where Waltham Way is. or if
But we can certainly have a look into that and get back to you after this session. And one of the kind of questions that's been asked, rightly so. So we had this last session back last month, and what has kind of changed as part of the kind of proposal? I guess Jordan, Lucas, you probably say that we're kind of still working further on the proposal. So, for instance, some of the kind of idea, the visualizations, particularly around from Laurel Gardens, those further reports in regards to mentioned the transport report has now been daylight sunlight report is now being completed, but there are further kind of almost kind of impact reports and that have been undertaken at the moment. But in terms of the design, I guess things are kind of being further added to it, and further kind of questions are being asked also about the detailing of the use of materials as well. We'd like to kind of what kind of further work has taken place since you've been working on it last month?
I mean, there's certainly been more refinement and detail added to the ground floor, and just general levels of detail in the design of the elevation. Perhaps nothing immediately apparent, but it's a sort of an ongoing process with the application being made next month. That we sort of push it and evolve it, and it's continually developing right up until the submission deadline.
And also, I just want to add to that. That's when the council have their consultation on the application as well, and there'll be kind of further comments from the council in regards to their thoughts and views on, let's say in the case of parking or servicing as well. So, although we're here today on January 18th, and we're looking at submitting next month, that's not kind of the end of us speaking to you and consulting in regards to your thoughts on the scheme as well, and particularly a lot of kind of further conversation to be had on the retail offer on the ground floor. But although it seems as if we're kind of shying away from things, we've kind of had to explain some of the constraints we're facing in relation to the site. Overrun just a little bit, but I appreciate there are questions to answer. You can also I'll start again. This session will be posted up online straight afterwards. We'll be sending across the slides to those people who attended today. Tomorrow morning. You can still get in contact with us by going back onto the website, sewardstoneroad.com, or emailing us on engage@sewardstoneroad.com, or giving me a phone call during kind of daytime hours of 0800 433 2622. I will be looking to meet with residents. I think it's going to be on Thursday, and you can also get in contact with Free Post Huddle Communications as well. If you feel as there aren't any of the questions that haven't been answered tonight, those are the kind of ways in which you can get in touch. And once again, we're more than happy to speak with you. Thank you ever so much for attending this evening. I'd like to say thanks to Jordan and Lucas and Ahmed for this evening as well, and giving the presentation and answering some of those questions. Thanks ever so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, you.